Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Go Ahead and Die, Unhealthy Mechanisms, out October 20th on Nuclear Blast. The album has 10 tracks, 41 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They are an American death, thrash, groove, metal band. Really hard to put them under one single umbrella. As far as the design goes, I like the fact that this album feels very compact. It's squeezed in. The songs are really tied into one another. It's almost an album that has no interruptions as far as its fluidity is concerned. Now, when you have records like this, very often you start to see patterns and repetition emerges throughout the experience of listening to the record. It's not the case here because they always have different influences. They always have different attributes. The songs have different perspectives, if you will, and having that and the backdrop in terms of how you create the songs allows them to still feel unified on one hand but still offer a sense of diversity on the other. This definitely adds playability to the overall experience. As far as the sound is concerned, this album reminds me of old school records that had that grit, that had that roughness, that were raw, that weren't overly produced, that had more of an analog feel to how they came across, almost like a live album but recorded in the studio. This record has all of those sonic experiences built into it. Now it takes that we saw on the debut album, but it takes it all the way to 11. I felt like on the debut record that was already there, but on this album is enhanced and it's perhaps a little bit more noticeable and in the forefront. But when you look at the lyrical content, when you look at the intensity and aggression of the songs, when you look where these tracks are coming from, what drives them, what inspires them, this sound matches that sort of intensity perfectly. You want the sound of the album to be as raw as the content that's within it. Imagine having a punk record that's produced like a prog album. It doesn't work. The sound experience has to match the intensity, the aggression, and the creation of the songs and the vision and image that the band has for their music. Therefore, this more unpolished, sludgy, grimy, gritty, raw record works really well for Go Ahead and Die. It becomes a little bit of their DNA of who they are as a band, and in this record that DNA starts to become solidified and you start to see it a lot better. Now when it comes to the elements of the sound, one of the elements that I thought that perhaps didn't have that rawness to it, that didn't feel as gritty, was the bass. I honestly really like the bass on this record because it's very subtle but very impactful at the same time. It's not one of those bass tones that really jumps into the forefront, and it's not also one of those that disappears in the mix. It's somewhere in between. It has a layer, it's always there. Every single song, if you pay attention to it, if you're listening really carefully, you could see the impact of the bass, and it has a positive impact in the experience. It kind of helps shape the songs a little bit better. It takes some of that roughness around the edges, and it gives this album, sound-wise, a little bit more depth. That depth is then enhanced by the drum sound. This album also has great drum sound that has quite a bit of oomph in it, and that those two elements working together, one bridges the other and allows them to connect really well to a more gritty, a more driven, groovier at times, really heavy at others guitar sound. The guitars on this album offered me different perceptions, even though sound-wise, most often than not, they were very connected from track to track. When you look at the solos, for example, on this record, the solos have an old school flavor to them. They break away from the mold of the song, they break away from the DNA of the tracks, and they infuse something differently, sonically, in terms of clarity, in terms of everything that they can give a track on any given time within any given song. So I honestly felt like the solos on this record added value to the tracks, brought a little bit of an old school flavor, but still work really well in the overall context of how they impact the song, taking something away but adding something new as well. But even outside of the solos, the grooviness of the tracks, the sludginess of the tracks, the heaviness of the tracks, some really catchy riffs on this album, all of that is really becoming the bass line, the motor that drives this record. The guitars have an incredible impact on pushing this album forward. I would say this is actually a very guitar-centric record where the guitars feel a little bit awkward at times, they feel a little bit rough at times, but all of that is by design, and all of that really allows you to see and feel the intensity and aggression of the songs. The bass plays that important role of connecting that more grittier experience with a more grounded experience of the drums. There's somewhere in between, once again, very subtle but very impactful in the overall experience sound-wise of the album. Now, as far as the vocals are concerned, I love the dynamic. I love when you have two different styles, two different approaches that are similar but yet different, it just gives more ebbs and flows to the song. It gives more mechanisms to the track. It allows you to do more within tracks in order to express better the emotions of the lyrical content and even the emotions of the sonic experience. I thought vocally this album was better connected than its predecessor. It feels like a more mature result of learning from the previous album, from the debut record, what worked, what didn't, and then having a more overall feel and a more overall look that is not only represented by the sound but also represented by the vocals and how the vocals interact with that same sound. Now, I've been one of those people saying that I would love to see Nail Bomb releasing a second record. I mean, that would be outstanding if that ever happens. I've kind of lost hope that an album like that would ever see the light of day. But fear not. If you're waiting for a Nail Bomb album, a sophomore album, you don't have to wait anymore. Pre-order, go get this record. To me, if Nail Bomb was to release an album today, this album would be it. This is how this album sounds. It has a lot of that Nail Bomb sound. It has a lot of Fudge Tunnel sound. Has a lot of those back in the day influences of the late 80s, early 90s. A little bit of that sludginess across the mix in terms of how that mix feels very unpolished. So there's a lot of Nail Bomb on this record. And that to me was a great thing, because once again, I've lost hope to see a Nail Bomb #2 record out, but this album definitely fits the mold as far as my experience is concerned and as far as what I took out of this record. Now, as far as favorite songs goes, I want to start off with Split Scalp. I love the intro. It's a very dissonant intro as you get into this song, and then it moves into a more dark death metal sound that uses the bass extremely well to add thickness to the experience. It allows the guitars to be more grimy, it allows the guitars to be more direct, and it allows the guitars to be a little bit more in the forefront. Vocally, the song is as dynamic as it is musically, and that adds movement, that adds texture and layers to how the track comes across. I love the alternating moments. It's a song that at sometimes it feels absolutely heavy and brutal, and then there's some moments where it has a little bit more of a methodic movement to it. It's this death sludge groove combo that just goes in waves from beginning all the way to the end. It has a cool ass solo. I love the dynamic of the solo. It infuses some clarity in the overall fuzziness that this track has, and I love how it ends. That old school feedback feeding back into the end of the song, and then allowing that feedback to be the intro into the next track, which is Tumors. One of the other songs that really ranks high for me on this record is Druggo Cop. This is a more direct, a higher tempo, very aggressive, very to the point, almost punk at times. It has great samples behind it. I enjoyed that. It brought a little bit of an industrial vibe into this song, a little bit of Ministry, a little bit of Fudge Tunnel mixed in there, but works really well in order to set the table, in order to set the tone to what this song is all about from a lyrical standpoint. So it creates a little bit of atmosphere, if you will. The switch between the verses and chorus as far as the vocals are concerned, to me that's a great dynamic. Having one delivery, one singer hitting you with the verses, somebody else hitting you with the chorus, the difference between the two, it's almost minimal at times, but still enough for you to see the break in between them, but not enough to create a jolt that completely separates them. So it's a nice little add-on. It's a nice little way of creating mobility, creating fluidity, and keeping a sense of continuity throughout the entire track. Last but not least, Blast Zone. This is a thick sounding song. Drums, guitars, bass. The experience of this track is really one of volume. Now there's still some grooviness in how this song moves and how this song hits, but that heavier sound really takes hold of the track and it becomes the common denominator throughout the entire song. that heaviness, that sludginess, that movement. You feel like you're being dragged through the mud. It's like there was a blast and there's a bunch of dead bodies, and you're grabbing one of those dead bodies and you're dragging it out. That's how this song feels. That's how this song sounds. I love that aspect of the track because it just allows you to almost sink into the song with every passing second. That heaviness really takes hold of the track and of the listener. This is it. Go Ahead and Die, Unhealthy Mechanisms, out October 20th on Nuclear Blast. Hit me up in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. I'm dying to hear what you have to say, and I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.